Hi and welcome. Today I want to talk about a sketch I did in Fusion 360, what I learned from the sketch and some features of the bicycle, and then when I'm done I'll tell you some things that I didn't know at the time I did the sketch. So the concept of the bridge bike is to have a bike that's suitable for people who need to get around a little more than what they can do on feet or carry more stuff than you can on a normal bicycle. You don't really want to have a car with them all the time, or really ever. It needs to be affordable. You have to carry your stuff in it. It's got to be safe and secure. You need to be able to ride it on bike paths. You need to be able to ride it comfortably on city streets. You need to have an ability to get it around, and it needs to be very affordable. So, to do that, I started with this sketch to show a little bit about what I was thinking of and maybe then build the bike from this sketch. So, I'm going to start with just what's in the sketch and some physical configuration of the bicycle, talk about how some of those features relate to the design goals, and from there talk about what happens next. So, here's the bicycle. As you can see, the rear wheel of the bicycle here is larger than the other wheels. It's a very simple frame bicycle. The main frame, let's see if I can highlight this main frame. The main frame is a very simple kind of beam to hook the bike to. It's designed in a way that you can bolt things on and off, partly for prototyping reasons and also for simplicity reasons. In the end, we want this bicycle to be relatively inexpensive so anyone can afford it, and you can option it up to do anything you want from there. Kind of basic bicycle seat sitting on there, that it has a regular sort of steering handlebar on top. What's a little different about this bike than other bikes is it has two front wheels. So this is approximately a tadpole configuration of a bike. Has two front wheels. They are smaller than the rear wheel. They have kind of normal, if you think, steering assembly parts as you would have on cars, go-karts, anything with a front end and a suspension. A little different than things with front ends and suspensions, though, is that the bridge bike has an ability to lean. A little different than a normal bike. Right, so that bike can lean. And now why do you want two wheels in the front? Well, in this case, we want to add to the bicycle a trunk. Right, that is a place to store your stuff. You can put backpacks in there, helmets in there, things you need to keep out of the wet and the rain and the wind, things you want to be there when you leave them with your bicycle and you come back. It's a tadpole configuration, and it's a tadpole configuration so that it can have a trunk, and it leans so that it can ride like a bicycle, and it leans with a pretty narrow track so that it rides comfortably like a bicycle down bicycle paths and fits in bike racks and that sort of stuff. Other features of this that count to make it a useful bicycle, I'm going to go and make that trunk not visible on the drawing again, is that it's got an electric motor and a place for a battery, and that combination means that you can have a pretty good distance and range while you use it. One of the things I noticed about electric bikes is that because of the additional weight of mostly the battery, a little bit the motor, is that the bikes need to have better braking. So if I zoom in here, you'll see I've added disc brakes to the bike. Those disc brakes give a really good ability to stop, and of course disc brakes in the back. So 3 standard large 180 millimeter disc brakes mean that the bicycle ought to stop really, really well. That's kind of the basics of it. It is a bike. It is very simple. You ride it like you ride a normal bike. It has handlebars, it has a seat. You lean when you turn. It stops. It's an electric bike. You can pedal and it'll go. You can push the button and it'll go. And it's a prototype bike, so pretty basic kind of frames and chassis, etc. Rather than get in any more detail of this, I want to talk a little bit about what I learned from it and what I do differently. Hopefully, though, this little bit tells you that the bridge bike is something that rides like a bike, it fits on bike paths, you can ride it in traffic, you can ride it where you want, it's got a place to mount turn signals and other things, and it has ability to mount a roof on it, etc. We'll get to some of those things later, but it's a bicycle, but it's a bit more than a bicycle. So what would I change based on what I've learned from this drawing? First thing I'd change is right in here with the front wheels. For various reasons having to do with some other work that I've done and looking at bicycles, I would now mount those things just straight up and down. It's simpler, it's easier to build, and seems just as effective. And how I would adjust for that difference is, I would take this kingpin right here and do all of that angular adjustment in how that kingpin's mounted. The other thing I would do is tighten up all of these assemblies here. I tighten up all those assemblies there so that the wheel ends up being a little closer in, so I could increase the size of the trunk relative to the track and decrease the track so it's shoulder width or even narrower than shoulder width. I'm not sure in changing that whether I will stay with these parallel bars or if I'll go to a pushrod suspension. We'll get into the conversation later about which way I think that ought to go. But this whole section right here, exactly how I want to build that, I'm still thinking about. Another thing I want to do is take this frame, particularly that one right there, where the battery mount is, and use that really just as a bike rack and change where the battery is to be either along this frame or along this frame to lower the center of mass of the battery. Other things that weren't really in the drawing I will add to the next thing about mounting points for different options and details about where the turn signals go and how do you mount roof on, etc. So that's it. What do I know about this version of the bike? Well, turns out that I had to take a bunch of time off, and that was because I broke my foot. It was a bit of a delay I didn't expect. When I got back to working on this, I discovered that I'd lost my original footage for this particular video. And in the original footage, I had left for me and for you a bunch of instructions or help or education about how to use Fusion 360 as a novice user. And now as I'm going back to the project, I'd hope to use that video to reteach myself how to do things. It's all gone. So, gone, I get to learn it again, that's what happens. In that came a little impatience, and in the impatience I said, I just want a bike to ride. I want to go out and build one and ride it. So, I made the Franken bike. It's prototype number 2, prototype number 1 being the popsicle stick prototype that told me that that geometry might just work. So prototype number 2 is, I think of it as the Franken bike. It's something I slapped together really quickly, and it works, and it's fun to ride, and I got the steering angles right, and there are things I certainly got wrong on it too, but it's great to ride. As to this drawing, there's nothing I'm going to ever do with it. I'm not going to make a bike from this because we're just past it. So there's things about electric bikes I want to show you and things about welding. When I got to welding bike frames and was looking at prototypes, I think for anybody who's interested in building things, whether it's bicycles or other things, it might be useful to learn some of what I learned about welders. So we'll get to that, and then after that, it's off to the next set of prototypes. So please join for that. I hope you will chime in, and hopefully you will join me building and riding bicycles. Thanks.